This is recording number 20. So
That's a
whoever
great
thought we'd
milestone.
get 20 done. So Rachel, you're making history of sorts.
Thank you.
Now when we get to 25, your history will be wiped out like a sandcastle at high tide. But
Our
still,
memories
we're
are
here.
so short. Yeah.
Welcome to an all-new episode of Work in Progress with John Lane and Will Barfield. This podcast explores leadership traits under stress with a special guest each week. We use a simple and accurate OAD assessment to identify key personality traits or superpowers, as well as the shadow side, kryptonite traits that appear when we're under stress. As always, we'll have some pod banter, shameless plugging, and we'll even let our guests talk for a bit. Of course, no humble brags. Welcome to the show.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Work in Progress podcast with John Lane and Will Barfield. Welcome, everybody. Our special guest, Rachel. We'll get to Rachel in a minute. Will, we have business at hand.
We do.
Yeah. Well,
Different than normal.
It's what we do. Couple of things. One is this is recording number 20. So
That's a
whoever
great
thought we'd
milestone.
get 20 done. So Rachel, you're making history of sorts.
Thank you.
Now when we get to 25, your history will be wiped out like a sandcastle at high tide. But
Our
still,
memories
we're
are
here.
so short. Yeah. It's really about living in the moment.
Absolutely living in the moment.
Congrats.
That's what we're all
Congrats,
about.
a milestone.
But that's pretty good. And then we also have to say this is our second take two. Rachel was one of our guests in the infamous December purge with our last software that we lost episode. So I think we can commit to this being twice as good as last time. Rachel, are you up for that?
I'll do my best.
Well, and the timing is great. You know, we'll hear some from Rachel in a little bit when she does her bio about why this is actually probably meant to happen this way.
Meant to happen.
Opportune.
All right. And then the last bit of news banter is today is Tuesday, March 28th. Mm-hmm. And Will, what happened at 10 a.m. today?
I had breakfast.
After a late goer.
Oh.
After that.
Yeah. So after my late break, well, right around the same time as my late breakfast, there was a post that went up. Mr. John Lane put it up about our leadership workshops that have evolved out of our Work in Progress podcast because of interest from participants and others who have been watching, my mom and your wife.
Exactly.
There are people who would like to see if we can do this for them at their companies, helping with their.
And we can, and we will. So that was super fun. Now this won't air for about 3 weeks, so it may be old news. We might be internet millionaires by then, Will.
It doesn't even take 3 weeks.
It's a distinct possibility. Okay, so we're going to start with the show as we usually do, and I will click us forward. I'm John Lane.
I'm Will Barfield.
We are
a
work in progress, and we're here with our friend, our fellow consultant, and our twice guest. So on Saturday Night Live, you guest host 5 times, you get a jacket. This is technically, so does she get a hat or something, Will?
Koozie.
All right. As soon as we make merch, you get the first one free. So thanks for joining us again. We appreciate it. Why don't you introduce yourself to our ever-growing empire of podcast watchers?
Yeah, sure. So thanks so much for having me.
Pleasure.
I am a fractional product leader and go-to-market strategist. I work with a variety of organizations. Sometimes it takes the form of startups who have a great product, sort of don't know where to go next, need that go-to-market support and execution. Exist larger established organizations that suspect they've got some hidden opportunity kind of hidden in their product and need help unlocking it. Or people who are testing a new product or initiative and need the kind of person who can start with a blank sheet of paper. And yeah, I've been in the Durham area now for almost 20 years, if you can believe that. Had a startup here very early on, raised some angel capital in the area, and have had the honor and the joy of working with some really great organizations in town. So,
great. Well,
check out her LinkedIn, listeners and watchers. Very impressive. How many years ago was it that you started that first startup, Rachel?
Schoolhouse, I started in 2008, right after college. So it was, many moons ago, but
I
such an
love that
incredible
picture
time.
of you standing in front of the car at the airport, the rental car at the airport that you
Oh,
posted.
yeah.
That's just so funny. You look like you look now and you're like, oh, that girl's gonna learn some
Oh
stuff the
my
hard
gosh.
way.
Just, looking at yourself pre-winding down a startup and
Yes,
post-winding down a startup.
yes.
It's like
Trust me,
you age quite a bit in that time.
I have done this. And then I think the message you asked us to get out to everybody who's listening is don't add an S to your last name. You were pretty adamant about that. Let's make sure
Correct.
that's our big takeaway from the show, if nothing else.
Hard
Okay,
stop on the R.
stop on the R Train. Oh, she's got a new nickname, R Train. This is
He loves
great.
nicknames. I've got
This is
several.
great. We're having fun. Okay,
We are.
let's get into it. So everyone who watches our show, hi mom, hi Carl, knows that we are going to talk about leadership traits under stress. People ask, well, where do you get the leadership traits from? We say right here from OAD. We take the assessment, we get your strengths and weaknesses, we cleverly convert them into superpowers and kryptonite, and then we probe you on them. So that's what we're about to do. So here is where we show the output of your OAD assessment. And Will, what do I ask?
You always ask someone who is as accomplished as Rachel how it feels to be reduced to a two-dimensional table.
Humbling, I guess. There's something that's sort of nice about realizing like, we all feel like we're so unique, and both in a good way, but also in a bad way. Like my character flaws are sort of, I don't know, unique to me. And these types of assessments, I think, are really nice because you sort of realize how you map to both your strengths and your weaknesses, and how everybody sort of has these, the yin and yang to their their personality and their working styles. I think it's very, it's like I said, it's humbling.
Did you speed of the assessment as compared to the output as a marketer who has to live at times in the data, to analyze, to study, to prove. What did you think about the efficiency of the assessment as compared to the readout?
I mean, incredibly, incredibly efficient. And, if it weren't so accurate, I would question it. But it was, uncanny kind of reading about the output and how much it resonated with, I think, my personality traits. So I think it's well worth the effort. I think there's a lot of these types of assessments that can be a huge time suck and, kind of difficult to get people over the hurdle of actually doing, but
Right.
this takes no time and is really valuable.
That's one of the reasons we picked OAD. I have two things to say on that. One is, and we'll get into it in a second, people who have your technical side of your trait versus social usually come at things more from a skeptical perspective, not
Yes.
closed-minded, but like, show me how you got there and I might believe you. And so that's your natural trait. And so you saw the data and believed it. And the second was, when Will and I were starting to do this, he did his assessment. He didn't even read it. He gave it to Amy and to read, and she came back and she had two things to say. One is witchcraft, because it was so accurate, and then the second one is same as you. She thought it was super accurate. All right, so let's break you down. So we'll do this real quick. So in OAD, we look at the four constructs: assertiveness, extroversion, patience, and detail orientation, and how they line up together dictates what trait you are and what quadrant you're in. So we looked at your relationship with first your most dominant construct is assertiveness, followed by detail orientation, extroversion, and P patience. And so when we look at you, we find somebody who is very independent, very venturesome, okay with risk, effective at delegation, comfortable with ambiguity in many cases. And look, you just jumped out on your own. You were doing startups before you even knew what you were doing. That is somebody who was comfortable with that. Your detail orientation means that we call that a hook back. When it comes back like that, that means that something's important to you. You're going to pay attention to it. Your lower E means that you are on the technical communication side. So that means you'll be a little more direct, a little more straightforward, a little more analytical, skeptical, like we said. And there's our friend low P. You have you are a multi-threader. You operate with a lot of urgency, and I think we're going to find out in the kryptonite section how that might get a girl in trouble sometimes.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, and then I'll just move on this real quick and say we'd like to show where our guests are on the matrix, and then as a coincidence, Will is also an architect developer. So we got two. I'm outflanked for the first time. So Will enjoy the moment, and
I'm basking.
Someone with in Rachel's quadrant would be typically defined as technically oriented generalist, and they have a very direct communication style, and they communicate with high confidence. So that's our friend Rachel. Will, I think it's time for you to talk.
Yes, and thank you. And Rachel, it's wonderful to be in the Architect Developer Club with you.
Welcome.
No surprise there. Actually, it's surprising that I'm in there. So these are the generic superpowers that are generated with the results of an architect developer profile, right? So, we'll get into some greater depth later, but of these, which are characteristic actually of both of us, is there one here that you would want to comment on that leapt out at you, or that you feel like, that's clearly a superpower that I identify with or others have associated with me?
Yeah, I think they all resonated with me to to varying extents, but the conceptual one stood out to me alongside just the general label of architect.
Yeah.
I really love being thrown into ambiguous situations and
Well, welcome to the podcast.
really hairy, like complex problems that there's not a clear path for yet, and you've got to really back out completely out to start to understand the underlying problems and drivers, in order to then work my way back to the actual reality, the details, the facts of the matter. And so I loved seeing that conceptual thing in there because as tactically focused and action oriented as I can be, I really love that, being in that space as well.
Great. Okay.
I may add one thing. I know I'm breaking our rule.
You are.
But I'll say this. We did extensive training a few weeks ago. One of the things we learned about people with a low E, which you have, is sometimes they come like they don't speak early and often. And sometimes people take that for aloofness. But we find that many of those people are very imaginative and creative because they have a kind of a rich inner life, but it doesn't go from brain to mouth. With me, if my brain ever has a thought, it is a very short circuit to my mouth, but not so with people with the low E. And so I think that's an interesting power. Let's talk about the other stuff, Will.
Rachel, you've been through some tough situations. We all have as entrepreneurs and, as, high level business people working for others. When you are in that inversion moment where superpowers can become kryptonite, these are the generic kryptonite issues that you and I see as architect developers. Is there one here that you want to touch on before we get into your personal breakdown of your readout?
Yeah, I actually think the last one is standing out to me right now after John, you just mentioned that, being too inwardly looking and focused on my own expertise and experiences. It's my natural instinct to like receive a problem and go off on my own in my corner, like learn everything I can possibly learn, do all my research, and then like come back and I've got I've got what I think is some great, solution or answer. And I've involved people to a certain extent along the way, but not to the extent that I should have or could. And I think that I have to really practice and force myself to like get out of my own, that inner narrative, that, inner path that I'm on to trying to solve whatever it is in front of me in order to like make it a truly collaborative process. So that one definitely jumps out to me. Especially after you just mentioned that, John.
I'm here to help.
Out of the blue question just randomly occurred to me, since I can identify with that same
Yes.
trait. Siblings, Rachel, do you have siblings?
I do. I have an older sister. She's 5 years older than me.
Yeah, as an only child here,
Mhm.
that trait was, it made it simple for me, right? Because I collaborated on my own all the time.
Mhm.
How did that go with the sibling? Did you find that more attention was focused on that one from the parents, so you could kind of disappear and do your own thing?
We didn't really have that dynamic. She was, she's 5 years older than me, and we are so different personality-wise. And she also was she has had a very kind of maternal
Ah,
instinct about her, which, I was so lucky to have, and an older sister from a very early age. And so, if anything, she was like just trying to help me get out of my like she'll watch me, like we'll just be hanging out. She'll be like, "Where did you go? Where did you go?"
come back.
Oh,
She knows I'm off somewhere, like thinking about something. So it's definitely grateful for a sibling that understands that all of these aspects of my personality without knowing anything about this assessment.
That's awesome. She kept you in check. Nice. All right. Speaking of sharing, so the happy stuff, the unicorns and the bunny rabbits and the rainbows here with the superpowers, when everything is sunny and fabulous, and you're at your best, this is what jumps out. Why don't you kind of walk us through this slide here? You picked these things when reading your results and wanted to talk about them.
Yeah, I think, as I mentioned earlier, my happy place is the opportunity to work on anything that requires very strategic thinking and problem solving, that can quickly lead to the opportunity to actually work on it and bring it to life. So I'm only as excited about a vision as I am about, the likelihood that it can come to be. And I love to be a part of the whole process. Just I think one of many reasons why I love startup environments and like growth stage organizations. That driving, aspect of my personality, which can definitely bite me, but I like to move fast. And when I identify opportunity, or we identify opportunity as an organization, like go after it now, And so I think again, just that opportunity to be both strategic and tactical, the straightforwardness and ability to be direct, I definitely that's I think another reason why honestly startup environments have been great. I think at the startup level, you can't really afford to allow ego to get in the way too much, because everything's high stakes,
Yes.
yeah.
or politics, right? And so you very quickly are getting to the point of the matter and, not taking things personally. Um, and so, I really thrive in that kind of an environment. I struggle where, you know, around like politics or
Right.
things that get in the way of doing what is in the best interest of the business. Like that's where I want to be, and I become, I can be frustrated if anything is sort of holding that back, for everybody's sake. And then the detail delegator is interesting because you already tapped into this. I love being strategic. I can be extremely detail oriented, and I will get to that level if it's something that I think needs that attention. But I also am really focused on prioritizing people's time. And if my highest and best use to an organization or a project is not some detail, I'm perfectly comfortable delegating that.
Yep.
But if I've got somebody on my team who is stronger in some area that I need to be giving them the reins and I need to,
Yeah.
implement some detail, you know, I'm very non-hierarchical in that sense. It's all about, is everybody adding the right value at the right time, you know? So that one was interesting to see also.
Did 2008, Rachel, have that level of wisdom when it came to the first startup you were building and the people that you pulled onto the team? Were you bringing on people that you knew were better than you in certain areas, had strengths you didn't? Were you trusting others? Were you pushing stuff down, or were you trying to own it all and, ended up
Oh,
choking yourself out?
God, I had no idea. I mean, managing people, learning to manage people and trust people, was the most difficult leadership lesson that I've had to learn over the past 15 years. Just that independent nature, the thinking that I can just get it and I can accomplish it all through, brute force,
Mm.
is misguided in so many levels. And it's assessments like these that allow me to give myself the grace of realizing it's just it's kind of a weakness and a personality trait that I manage around. But over time, you see that not only can you not build a business trying to do everything yourself, but the more that you let go and trust people, the more you see the ways that they'll do it better and differently and more imaginatively than you ever would.
Yep.
But it's just something that didn't come naturally. So
No. And then there's not a CEO that we've had on here, or a founder that hasn't had similar experiences. We all try to do it all until we fail and get better.
Mhm.
Kryptonite. So when the going gets tough and things get challenging, or situations apply pressure that's hard to handle, our shadow side emerges. Our
mhm.
strengths become weaknesses. Superpowers become kryptonite. You
Mm.
pick these. Let's talk about them a little bit, and then I might ask a incredibly piercing question.
Yeah, sure. Um, I think the patience factor comes out. I think also that desire to like get into the details. And I have to be so in tune with that because what I've noticed, it took me all these years of realizing like,
Mm.
how do I need to be treated as an employee? And how do I need to feel trusted, especially in times of chaos and uncertainty, to feel really invested in a team, and in my manager. And it's actually in those times that you need to be the most trusting of your team and the least likely to swoop in and say, I'm just going to do this. You know what I mean? And so, that one has been a really tough one to kind of learn the hard way, but so gratifying, so gratifying when you see it and you're managing around it. It's like, it just feels like I don't know, the gift of 15 years in your career. You know what I mean? I think the open-mindedness, I spoke to that a little bit earlier, but, getting out of my head and realizing that not everything is an academic exercise.
Yeah.
Like, there's value in just, you know, networking or having a conversation without a pure agenda with certain folks just to
Yeah.
Oh, I don't recommend that.
yeah, I mean, I sort of turn everything into an academic exercise. It's
Yeah.
really uncanny. So that definitely resonated with me.
Talk a little bit about these last two, if you don't mind me jumping in. So the colder, intimidating, and then too direct for a woman. Can you think of a time when you were just acting yourself and then that backfired?
Yeah, this one's really interesting because, I am very analytical and I strive to be a straight shooter. However, the reality is that some of these traits are perceived very differently in men than in women. And, you're far more likely to hear about a male entrepreneur who is a wild success, a visionary, a forward thinker. But he's just, he's a straight shooter. Like he's kind of
Mm.
abrupt, but he's just he's just straightforward. You know what I mean? And I'll be honest, I feel like women don't always get that luxury, like of being a visionary and coming off like a jerk to people. And so I think that women, no matter their personality traits, have for better and for worse, have had to be very hyper aware of how they're being perceived in corporate environments, especially as you climb the ladder.
Yeah.
And so I think that, to be honest, I've been forced to kind of manage around that trait. But it becomes sort of difficult when I see an assessment like this, because I know it's something I have to be aware of. But it's also sometimes difficult to untangle how much of it is, outweighed, sort of unfairly tied almost to, you know what I mean, to being a woman, versus how much leeway do you get as a man for delivering sort of the facts as they exist. So that one's a little bit tough, but I know
Kryptonite.
Something that I do with, so.
Yeah, and Will, if you don't mind, it's one of these things where the architect type is direct with high confidence, and so that's sort of how you're built. Will's an architect; that's how he's built. But then you have this added layer to navigate through. So that's double hard.
Yeah,
so it's twice as hard for her it is for you. So be lucky.
Yeah. Well said, John, and I appreciate.
We might cut this out.
What?
We might cut this out.
No, I think it's great. It's a really tough, important topic, though. I mean, these different personality traits, are experienced and show up really differently, I think, in men and women, and in the work environment. And I think it's important to talk about that.
There are inherent biases that come with that in the work environment. One of the things that's important in this day and age is the recognition of the need for diversity, equity, inclusion. That's not just about gender or race or any of the other preferences. It's about age. All things up and down and across need to be considered when you're thinking about who you're working with and who you want to work with. And I think that, Rachel, that you selected to pull that out and talk about how your personality type, when the kryptonite shows that you being you can be perceived negatively simply because you're a woman, is a great point. And we're talking about vulnerability on this podcast, and to openly chatting about these things. And I think it's great that you chose to sharpen your pencil and make that point.
I totally agree.
And I think I also think of it as, somewhat of a blessing in that way. Like, I don't know, it's forced me to, I do think about how my words will be received, where my instinct might be to just like blurt out what I feel like is the obvious truth of what's in front of me. But, for better, for worse, I feel like it's made me more in tune with how you're received. And that also generates empathy. If I'm actually pausing before I'm delivering some, what I think is some cold, hard truth, and thinking about how this person will receive it, not for my personal advancement, but for how it's going to make them feel, that's a good thing. So
it is. And, John has slid us to the next slide here. Thank you, Mr. Lane.
Executive producer, sorry.
Yeah, no, you reflected, you learned, you shared a lot. Is there anything that you gathered in going through this exercise with us, Rachel, that you can, turn right around, and actively utilize in the professional setting with your new business, or home or social, any other aspects of life where you think you can, make sure that you're focused on these strengths and weaknesses, and your work product and those around you benefit from it?
Yeah, I mean, I think from a work standpoint, this exercise has just provided even more clarity around, why I gravitate towards the kind of work that I gravitate towards, and why it sort of gives me energy and the things that don't necessarily. And I think that's just so important. I feel like the older I get is owning who I am and
Well,
and what I'm good at and what I'm not good at, and being really honest about that and self-aware, because we're all human and we all have those. So I really appreciate it from a professional standpoint. It's been, again, very clarifying. And then I think in my personal life, it also carries over. And I think the phrase that I used earlier about everything not being an academic exercise can apply to how I approach many things in my life. And then, I have to back up and be like, wait, this is supposed to be fun. What am I doing here? And so, having patience about some aspects of my life, and looking at things more organically, pursuing interest for just the sake of learning and not with an end goal in mind. I'm actually learning to play the drums right now, which has been a real exercise in that, and came to mind for me when I was reading this assessment output. So yeah, lots of ways that this applies.
Little point I'll make on the way out the door. I think it will be helpful, Rachel, learning OAD, learning about, myself. One of the things that it has aided me in is selecting the types of clients I want to work with. And as you get familiar with someone who could be a prospect, and you start to see some of those things pop up in either their personality or their company or the way that they do business, and you're like, you know what, this is not going to be a good fit for my profile, the kind of work I want to do, when you are the one who's getting to choose who you do work with and don't, and how much you enjoy your work when you're going to spend so much of your time launching this business. I recommend, if you haven't already, kind of look at the clients that you work with as well through this lens of who is Rachel and what are her strengths and weaknesses.
I love that, Will.
Yeah, that is really, really great feedback. I'll take that. Keep that in mind. And, it's very true. It's as much as what I like to work on and think I can be effective in, as it is who am I working with, and are we going to, do their values and their working style and their needs align with my profile.
For the second time in our relationship, we bid you adieu. We thank you for joining us today. I'm John Lane.
I am Will Barfield.
And all of us are a work in progress. Yeah. Enjoy.
Thanks, guys.
Good week, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel.
Work in Progress is a podcast presentation of Slipshod Productions. Available on LinkedIn and YouTube. Executive produced and starring John Lane and Will Barfield. Talent booking, production, and editing by John Lane. Thanks for watching. See you next week.